This is the Gala Show. I'm your reporter on the beat, Gala Avery. On this episode, you may know my guest as a veteran who has served our country, a father of three, or one of the founders of Smoke Bros, a veteran-owned spice and seasoning company that serves craft flavors. But here on the Gala Show, I simply know him as Mikey B. Mikey Beaven. Hey, Mikey.
Hey, Gala. How are you?
I'm doing really, really well, especially after we just went to Finney's.
It was awesome.
And had like the best lunch of my life. So before we bring up the topic for today, I have a question for you. Why is it so important for people to support veteran-owned businesses?
The key thing about supporting veteran-owned businesses are, veterans get out of the military. They're behind the power curve slightly in terms of industry and knowledge. That's a detractor from it. But really, they're folks that spent their life sacrificing and serving America. You're supporting Main Street, not Wall Street. You're going to have a better customer experience. It's your community. You're going to be engaging with people from your community, and you're going to probably have a more genuine and favorable experience with that.
Do you think that being a veteran has influenced how you run your business?
100%. From a leadership standpoint, speed and maneuverability, our strategic communication, everything that we learn in the military about leadership, organization, culture, all that gets baked in right there from the beginning.
Wonderful. As always, my guest gets to bring their topic to the mic. Mikey, why don't you tell us what your topic is and why you decided to choose it?
My topic is the movie Metal Lords that's on Netflix.
I loved this because when I emailed you and I was like, what's our topic? You were like, Metal Lords.
Oh, yeah. It's amazing. I love this movie. Cradle to grave, this movie was the best thing ever. Time for a commercial break. And we're back.
You heard it here. We're going to be talking about the film Metal Lords. 30 minutes on the clock, and our time starts now. So did you see this movie right when it popped on Netflix?
I did. We had just finished, my wife and I just finished watching the history of heavy metal, which broke it down from like the Beach Boys to Pantera.
Really? The Beach Boys?
So there's a theory that heavy metal derived directly from the beach, beach
kind of
bands.
like the crooners, yeah.
Yeah, and it was to kind of go against your folky guys that had no technical ability. Mm-hmm. And so if you really look at it, you kind of had like your Crosby, Stills, and Nash that are kind of jam bands that loosely knew how to play stuff like at a church camp or something. Mm-hmm. And then you got the Beach Boys, and then it just carries in like the drum beats. They're playing faster and more technical.
Yeah.
And then that carries over. And then you think about it going into like Rush with two bass drums, and it's like a horse galloping. And then here we are all the way up to like Iron Maiden. It was literally a bunch of band geeks that wanted to go, you guys have no business being here. We're going to play faster, louder, and more technical than you.
And have you always been a heavy metal fan?
Always.
Well, because you're really into, what is it called, GWAR?
Oh, I love GWAR.
I know you love GWAR.
I've tried to get your dad and other folks to go to GWAR with me every October.
I know, no, GWAR probably already happened, right?
They'll be in LA in, I think, November this year.
Oh, well, maybe November is your lucky month then. But so you were always into metal, and your wife and you just finished watching, and then you saw this movie pop up?
I'm converting her.
You're converting her.
Yeah, so
Has
this is
she
like
gone to GWAR?
Yeah, so right now I'm on this heavy metal evangelistic journey.
Trying to convert as many people as possible.
It's kind of funny. My mom and I actually just had a conversation not too long ago, because she used to think like Iron Maiden, it's all satanic. And if you actually look at the lyrics of like the popular Iron Maiden songs, like Number of the Beast, it's actually Paul's revelation.
Oh, really?
It's a historical account of
Paul's
Paul's revelation.
That's really cool.
Trooper, it's about the Prussian invasion. They're history lessons. And all right, so put it in a context. The lead singer of Iron Maiden, he has a PhD in history from Oxford.
Wow. And he's including that in his writing of heavy metal. So you finished the history of heavy metal.
We finished the history of heavy metal, so that was obviously in my previously viewed, right? So
Yeah.
being targeted, and it popped up, and I was like, I put it on, and like instantly it starts like with this just solid beat, and I was like, well, the credits are coming in, and I was like, oh my goodness. Hold on, let me pause this. Everybody get in here. You gotta
come on.
see this.
And you have 3 children, right?
I do. I have an 18-year-old son, 15-year-old daughter, and a 13-year-old daughter.
And so everyone just like, come on in.
The most connected one to the film was my 13-year-old
Oh, really?
because she plays the cello.
Oh my God. And that's my favorite instrument. So I love cello representation. I actually don't have Netflix. And so I was like, I got to check this out because the fact that it was only on Netflix, it means that it totally flew under my radar completely. That's why my dad hasn't seen it either.
Yeah.
And so I was able to watch it. And man, it was really fun. And I'm
Yeah.
not a metalhead at all. Like, full disclosure, I'm a theater geek.
I mean, it was so counter to everything that like teenage movies are. And that's what I loved about it because I feel like that's what we're missing in the world today.
Yeah, and it was really interesting to me that it came from Netflix because you wouldn't really assume that Netflix would be the one that's like producing something that's so, I don't want to call it punk. I don't know if punk is the right term.
No, but it's counterculture for sure,
Yeah,
right?
for sure. It's definitely counterculture, especially with what is being shown to kids and teens right now. So your 13-year-old was the one that was really connected.
Oh man, like they love it. Actually on my phone, I'll show you. Like, I actually downloaded the song,
Oh my God, you downloaded the song.
like the Machinery of Torment. They actually released it
They did?
under Skullflower. Like they have it.
It's under Skullflower.
Yeah,
Not
it's under
Skull,
Skullflower.
yeah.
yeah, not the other name that they started with. I mean, it captured everything that like growing up in the '90s, right? Outside of like.
You give us some context of where you grew up.
So I grew up outside Louisville, Kentucky, in Indiana. I used to go in the city quite often. And there was like a underground punk scene coming from the Midwest, Blue Laws. I wouldn't say true Bible Belt, but that persona was there. But there was a lot of underground bars, and they were predominantly gay and lesbian clubs, and they would like host punk bands. And I'm not talking like No Effects and things like legit underground punk bands. And you'd be in these like old whiskey cask cellars with like raw bands that actually like captured some sort of political ideology, teenage angst, something that was happening, music that had meaning to it.
And a message.
And a message.
And also feeling behind it, like true emotion behind it.
Yeah.
And we're kind of missing that right now.
Kind of missing it a lot. And especially if you think about it, like that was aligned with, back in that time, it was just solely the gay and lesbian community, right? And that seems like that it's separated. And now it's like, there's no kind of message about anybody's angst or struggle or journeys. It's all just predominantly bubblegum.
Yeah, there is a lot of bubblegum. So I think I overheard you telling my dad at lunch that this like made your family be like, no more bubblegum.
We are anti-bubblegum folks.
Have you always been that way?
After watching the film, it hit me like a ton of bricks. Like, you guys don't have a Rage Against the Machine. Your generation doesn't have a Bad Religion. Your generation doesn't have these things that espouse true beliefs. Like, you're over here like listening to Lady Gaga or whatever they're listening to, and like, and it's literally bubblegum. It's great to pass the time. There's no calories. It does nothing for you.
Yeah, it's sweet.
Yeah.
And it's fun to play with.
Temporarily sweet.
Yeah, and fun to play with.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that like if you look back a little bit, because there is this, first off, I love the girl in the movie, the cellist. She's awesome. Like from the first moment you meet her, it's like she is just like unapologetically herself. And I like how naturally the relationships form, and it feels really realistic. And also the movie holds no punches, just talking about real things that teens are going through. And it doesn't force it in your face, like her medication usage.
Yeah.
It just is a thing that she does, and it is a thing that's happening to her and affecting her life. But it's not like, oh, like here's the message is like she has to go to do this and whatever.
No, it's a portion of the story, not the story.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? The journey was the story.
And the reward, to be honest.
Yeah.
It's fulfilling from beginning to end. And yeah, it's shocking that I'm saying that about a 2022 Netflix movie. Don't tell anyone I said that. But if you,
I was shocked too, not to lie. Like
Yeah.
when I saw that pop up, I was like, whoa, this is.
Yeah, and some people like online really like it. And then some people are like, I'm a death metal enthusiast and I hate this movie.
Like, you can't be a purist anymore because everything's overproduced and nothing genuine's coming out. So how can you, like, I felt like everything about that, like you said, is completely genuine, authentic, and the journey, man, like, to do a comparison, growing up in the 90s, watching shows like Saved by the Bell, right? Mm-hmm. As a high school experience, which is nobody's high school experience. It's just kind of a play off of that 80s.
Or Ned's Declassified School Survival Guide for middle school for my generation.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know. It actually made me want to go to public school watching that. I don't know what world I was living in.
It was like Diary of the Wimpy Kid mixed with MMA. Like,
yeah.
That's, like, I loved it. And the journey and the struggles and the parent child, like, dynamics were like on point. And it captured like classic themes like bullies and, they were outsiders, but it wasn't this like Breakfast Club kind of feel good outsiders. Mm-hmm. Like, they work together to create their big FU to everybody.
Yeah, they do for sure.
And I think that's the thing with like, I miss about punk and heavy metal is like, they worked together to create something that was just like this big FU to this system.
I also really like the correlation that they make between classical music and heavy metal, because people, like, as you mentioned earlier, people really forget that like heavy metal is incredibly technical. It's not just them shredding random notes and like screaming, ah. It's a really technical thing like classical music is.
So that documentary that I talked about earlier, I wish I knew the name of it off the top of my head, but one of the guys actually said, if you slow down a heavy metal song, like 1/64th, like take it from that, like, and take it back down to like 1/4 time, it's literally a symphony.
Yeah, and it really is.
And one man is playing the entire percussion. 36 drums.
Isn't that
that's
crazy?
insane?
That is insane. I love the shot where they show how big his drums are, and he's just like in the middle, like, what do I play? The drum, not the drums. Yeah. And it was so funny when he did that. It's interesting, like, for I don't want to say like my generation, but like when I was growing up, a movie that would have been kind of akin to this would have been School of Rock with Jack Black.
Yeah.
Like, that's kind of, I was trying to figure out, like, is there a comparison to this movie? And that was kind of like the closest comparison I could think of.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Because he's kind of like School of Rock. It's kind of punk rock. He's getting a bunch of kids together to kind of go do a battle of the bands. And he's not really supposed to be doing it. So he's doing it behind closed doors. No one really knows how to play their instrument, but they all kind of come together and do it. And it makes you feel good in the end. And also the relationships and the writing in that movie are really good, just like the relationships and the writing are in this movie.
And the kids are learning to express themselves in a new way. I think that's the piece too, is I think School of Rock, they had somebody guiding them. Mm-hmm. They had their own like internal kind of, I don't know, tribal kind of leadership between the three of them.
Yeah. And
influenced each other in different ways.
Yeah. And I think that's a really important factor. It's also, I love all these movies about self-discovery of like that age where it's not even like becoming a man, but it's like becoming a teenager. Like, you're halfway on to mandom. Like, you're not a kid anymore, but you're not a man. Like,
slightly losing innocence, getting a little bit of insight.
Just getting a little bit and finding who you are, your discovery, where it's like all of a sudden you have purpose in your life. And I think that they make a really good point of that in the beginning, because like one of the main character, he doesn't really want to be in the heavy metal band, but his best friend who has like saved him from the bullies, he's stuck with heavy metal the longest out of anything he's stuck with. So I'm going to support him because he's just trying to find himself. And here's where he is right now.
Yeah.
He's in heavy metal, which I don't think is such a bad place to be.
No, not at all. I think I agree with you 100% on that. That another aspect of the movie that like the cameos were so
for
nostalgic.
Someone like you who is super, super, super into heavy metal.
It was awesome to see all these bands do these cameos and like kind of in a playful, slightly ironic kind of way, and the things that they would say from the persona that most people would perceive of them on the stage, right? Like, like Judas Priest comes out very hard, very, black leather and spikes. And then he's like, don't screw it up with your girlfriend. Like it's, they take on these dad personas.
Because they are, that's the funny thing though, is like they were punks and they still are punks nowadays. Like I totally believe it. But punks grow up. And punks become fathers.
Absolutely.
And the punk dads are like who you have to look up to as a young boy. You got to find your punk dad.
That was the biggest topic at lunch today.
Yeah, it was finding your punk dad. For me, it's just funny because like people always ask me about like cinematic fathers, and for me, I have a literal cinematic father. I have my actual dad,
Yeah.
who is like my cinematic father. So that question's loaded for me. Who's your cinematic dad? It's like, who's my punk dad? Well, I don't know, but I know who my cinematic.
Your dad's pretty damn punk.
No, my dad is punk. People might forget or don't know, but like he was involved in the punk scene in the South Bay, growing up around Video Archives. Like he was friends. Like I think he originally drew the Descendants logo. The guy, he did it for him in class because they all went to school together and they were a few years older and they rented from Video Archives. So he was friends with the punk. And yeah, my dad is pretty straight-laced. He's not a cop, but everyone thinks he's a cop. Like, I remember once I went to get my haircut. We were living in Venice Beach, and I went to go get my haircut, and they had a homeless man problem. Like, some homeless guy was just standing outside the window, like, staring at the girls, maybe flashing himself. I'm not sure. But my dad came to pick me up to, like, walk me home or whatever, and he just stood there and, like, I think he had his Royal Canadian Mounted Police cap on that he got from like some tour that we went on in Manitoba. And he just stood there and he went on and talked to the guy. And then the guy left and never came back. And all the hairdressers were like, is your dad a cop? I was like, quite the opposite, I would say.
Oh, man. Yeah, like, I mean, that's been the theme at like lunch today was like bubble gum is everybody consumes. Like that's where we're at. It's just consumption, right? There's not a lot of production, like authentic production.
Why do you think that is?
Everything's bifurcated and segmented. Like all the, like, how do you get your podcast out? And it's bifurcated and segmented. It's not one single channel. It's not, it's this whole omni-channel everything.
Yeah, it is. It gets duplicated to, this is where I say you can listen to my podcast anywhere. You can listen to Spotify, Apple. I think my dad even puts it on YouTube at this point.
Yeah.
So it really is just everywhere.
I mean, you have to, or SEO is not going to pick it up and nobody's going to find you.
Exactly.
You're lost.
Which is really weird. I mean, I think about that with television. And also like with movies and stuff, like everything feels like it's behind a paywall that like I have to pay a billion different things to access. And
this is like where I would say anybody that's listening that's super creative, here's a great idea. Build a website. I don't know what you would call it, but like I used to buy DVDs out of trunks of people's cars, not the record store. Like we need a website or a place to go to get raw. You know what I mean? Like punk,
you mean like torrents? You mean like, oh no,
not torrents, but like they can put it like, because if you go through YouTube, like there's an algorithm that like blocks me from seeing anything, right? Like,
okay, well, so I know zero, disclaimer, I know zero about Pornhub. Zero, absolutely zero. But what I do know is that the only place that you can see Russ Meyer's movies, which he's like one of the big exploitation guys of like the 70s, is Pornhub, because he's uploaded all of his X-rated art films there. And so you can go there to watch them. And you got to search for them, I guess, but you're going to find them.
I'm good friends with the guy who created the algorithm and manages it.
Is there an algorithm for Pornhub?
Yeah.
See, I don't
I'll
know
give you his
anything.
name after this.
Oh, thanks. So I can go contact him about push Russ Meyer's movies high on the list. High. Let them see cinema.
Yeah. I mean, from a communication standpoint, not even an art standpoint, like, we don't have a single place where we can go turn on the TV to get straight communication from the president, from anyone.
Yeah.
It's all filtered and it's talking heads regurgitating with their own opinion in it.
Well, do you think it's good to have a direct line to conversations like that?
I think absolutely. I think it's a telephone game, right?
Well, yeah, it's like so-and-so said one thing and then someone reproduces it as another thing. And then by the time that I read it, it goes through 10 hands.
Yeah. And not to get like super geeky, but it's like the old, like we talked about earlier, like it's the Descartes principle, right?
Yeah.
Like there's an evil demon controlling my thoughts, and who is this evil demon, and where are these thoughts coming from? Who controls them? Like
at this point, the algorithm controls them.
Yeah.
As you asked me, you're like, where does the devil come from? And my short answer is in the hearts of men. Like that's where it comes from. It comes from your own heart and your own mind. And I think that the algorithm feeds into that because it draws you into this vortex of things that you really don't want to see. And it's funny. My brother and I were talking about Instagram's algorithm. And he said, by now you would think that Instagram would have realized that I'm vegetarian and that I don't want to see meat on my For You page. And I was like, yeah, but it's trying to push it on you. It's trying to show you it.
We brought up a movie today at lunch. It's one of my favorite movies as well. from the 90s, PCU, with
Yeah,
Jeremy
I have never seen this.
With Jeremy Piven and Jon Favreau. And it's politically correct university, and they go around making fun of everybody that like changes their whims and who they're protesting for every other week. They refer to them as the cause heads. Every week there's a new cause.
It's funny because it's like, obviously I was born in 95, so I don't know what it was like really in the 90s, but it feels like that's exactly what it's like today.
Very similar, I would say, slightly. I think my teenage experience in the 90s versus, my kids is totally different. There's no human interaction, right? There's no Rogers and Quintons I had a Roger and Quinton in my hometown,
Do you remember his name?
I think it was Dave and Tim.
Okay, shout out to Dave and Tim.
I don't know where they're at today, but they worked at the Family Video. That's what it was called.
Yeah.
And I'd ride my bike over there. And of course I would go get Reservoir Dogs, Pulp Fiction, whatever.
Yeah.
I think I was 13 when I watched True Romance for the first time. But I would go get a Winnie the Pooh case or something from the kids section and put it inside. Boop, they'd scan it out and I'd go home. I mean, they knew what I was up to. They would be outside smoking and goofing off, kind of like
But
Clerks.
they were your shepherds.
Yeah.
And they were like, this kid's got it down. This kid should be watching this.
Oh, man. I'll never forget the first time I watched Falling Down. Oh, dude, I love that.
Oh, my God. It's so funny. That's one of my best friend's favorite movies. And I remember when he came to LA, we went to the pier and he's like, this is the Falling Down Pier. And I was like, really? I did not know that where we are.
I've done that with your dad and with the bank vault downtown.
Yeah,
and
the bank
talking
vault.
about yeah.
It's so fun.
But back to the PCU thing, find it and see if you can watch it. If you can, send me the link because I've looked everywhere. I don't know what's happened with the distribution of it.
No, I'll
because
find
you've
it.
got two Disney Marvel dudes that are wrapped up in this thing, right?
Yeah, it's been erased.
And I've even looked in deep torrents. I've done some deep dives for this movie because I want to show it to my kids.
Well, I'll try to find it because this may or may not be, I can't remember if I've said this on the show before, but I am friends with some of if you've ever torrented anything, these are the guys who seeded it. They are the OG torrenters, some 50-year-old dudes in Canada that I met online, and they have everything that I think is lost media that I can't even find a VHS release of, they somehow have.
I want to send a shout out to the guys that did, whoever created these torrent things. Thank you. You kept me entertained during the war. Appreciate it.
Oh, really? Yeah. See, I've never torrented before, so I don't know anything about it, but a lot of people are really anti-torrent and etc. But I've seen studies that it actually increases purchases for physical media because people, they try it before they buy it.
I try to, if I love something, I try to buy it in every form.
Really?
Yeah. I don't trust clouds it's going to go away. I try to get it as physical as possible. And that's the same thing with Lucky Day, right? Looking for it, trying to link all these links and all. It was so segmented, and that was such a hard where do I get this? Well, I don't have that. It was tough to shepherd my own friends into watching the film because I don't have that. I don't have this. Let me find the links.
Or it was on this place at one point. It's no longer there. Who knows where it is now? Oh, it's here. Oh, it's there. I think there is a Blu-ray out there available. I think maybe. But who knows if that's still in circulation. Actually, in Germany, they are doing a Blu-ray of it. My dad just did a big interview for it, so that will be on the special features for the German DVD release. I get in trouble with my friends because I keep on referring to Blu-rays as DVDs, but to me they are exactly the same thing.
I do the same thing.
I know my friends are actually Josh Olson told me he was you know who calls Blu-rays DVDs? My grandma, and I was like, well, I guess I got a little bit of your grandma in me. A movie that we talked about at lunch, I can't remember if you said you had seen it or not, that we said was similar to PCU was Idiocracy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Love that movie. I mean, Mike Judge is phenomenal. Everything he does. I'm really impressed. And if Mike's listening, I want to give you a big high five and a hug. You're the re-release of Beavis and Butthead recently. Mm-hmm. Everybody wants to talk about South Park confronting all the social constructs. He's done a phenomenal job with this new Beavis and Butthead as well, by the way.
I think Beavis and Butthead, actually, I think Mike Judge in general is one of the greatest voices of, I don't even know if I want to call it satire or more if it's fortune telling of our generation, because I feel he's just calling it how he sees it. It's not even satire at that point. It's just the truth. When I watched Idiocracy holds up, by the way, for anyone who watched it when it came out and has not watched it since. It holds up.
Fun fact about Idiocracy, because your dad's taught me to geek out on stuff. Idiocracy is responsible for the footwear Crocs.
Wait, what?
So when they were making the film, they were like, hey, we need to get some goofy shoes. They found the Crocs. They were about to go under, actually, and all they had was like orange, like prison
Like
Crocs.
prison
That's what they were
Crocs, yeah.
making. That's what they were originally going to make them for. And here you go.
Oh my God, now everyone's wearing...
back and watch it, you can see how many Crocs you see.
That is so funny. I know that like nurses were really into Crocs because they could wear them because they don't conduct electricity or something like that. So
and they can wash them off.
And they can wash them off if they get blood on them. But Crocs are huge right now. I don't own a pair. I own a pair of like, I'm going to air quotes, designer Crocs, like some designer shoe that looks like a Croc, which I think is really funny that I bought. They were on mega sale, so why not? But people get those charms and they put them in their shoes and everything.
They bling them out. Like it's like a whole thing.
Bedazzled. But so now that your kids have seen this movie, have they seen PCU?
So PCU is the only one they haven't seen.
Are you going to show it to them when you find it?
I truly believe like don't shelter your kids from the world.
Yeah.
Like my parents had me when they were 16. They didn't shelter me from the world, and I think that was probably the best thing they ever did for me.
Yeah.
They've seen Idiocracy, Falling Down. Like,
what other movies were really important that you showed your kids that you would recommend maybe for other parents to show their children? I get asked that question a lot by people that are
there's a lot of like
up and coming parents.
The F word in my house is not, it has to be used in context and in proportion.
Interesting. Okay, so what is the proportion that's too much?
Know your audience first off, right? So like if grandma's there, like we don't, and it needs to be used kind of appropriately, not all the time. If you use it all the time, it loses all meaning.
Exactly.
And it's not, and they don't go around the house saying it like morons. Like,
well, they shouldn't.
It's used to, as you know,
an expletive
and to amplify a certain situation.
Even your 13-year-old?
No, she's a little more sweet.
Yeah.
She's still got a little bit of that innocence, and I think the next summer is going to be like her Sandlot summer or My Girl summer where she grows and
her little darlings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But my kids have a really dark sense of humor.
Well, like, I think they get it from their dad.
Oh,
so.
a little bit. Like we were joking around, and some people might get offended, but you know, sorry if you do. But I was like, hey, there's a little boy that lives next door to us. He looks like a young Thomas J. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I'll buy him a pair of glasses and like put him in some 70s clothes. And then you dress as a bee. And they just cracked up laughing.
You also brought up the other thing, which I think is really interesting because it was just like a throwaway sentence that you said. But when you said like you were stationed and that Torrance like saved you, what were you watching when you were overseas?
Oh, man.
Because you were over for a long time, weren't you?
Man,
how long?
I did altogether overseas, combat, not combat, about 12 years, 68 months, broken up about 10 months a year. 10 months per year on average. But man, I would go back and watch like old Kubrick stuff. I would go back.
Was it all stuff you had seen before, like comfort stuff?
I'd rewatch it, and then you discover more and more and more stuff.
Yeah.
People talk about like, oh, I love rereading the book because I see stuff. I'm like, okay, like I would
like,
rewatch movies. And I'm like,
whatever.
oh my gosh, I never saw that before.
Yeah.
Or never looked at it in that context.
Or you've gone through something now that gives you more appreciation for like what you're watching or more context or.
Absolutely. Like, while I was, I'd be studying for, college classes or whatever while I was in the middle of the war, and then do something philosophical, and then I'd watch something and I'd see it a little bit different. And I don't know. I always try to take the academia and kind of look at the films from a social construct and
a social setting.
And then it's all relative to the times, right? Like if you watch Falling Down today, it means something different to you today than it did in 1995.
Oh, exactly. I mean, my best example for me personally would be when I saw Full Metal Jacket for the first time. I was in Beijing on the New Year, and in the movie, they have their New Year that happens. And it was the Tet Offensive, and it was Year of the Monkey. And in the movie, it was the Tet Offensive, and it was Year of the Monkey. And so I was in Beijing with the fireworks going off while I'm watching these scenes where the guns are happening. And it was like, I felt like I was in the movie. It was really weird.
Yeah. I feel like Full Metal Jacket is just one of those classics that like really captures the essence. That's like the duality of man, right? In that movie, it tries to get it, but there's a piece that Steve really opened me up
Yeah.
to. The night before COVID locked everything down, Steve took me to go see a reading of Pablo Hummel with Al Pacino. And it's probably one of the greatest gifts Steve ever did for me.
Yeah, for those that don't know, we're talking about Steve Bing, who was a dear friend of Mikey, introduced my dad and Mikey to each other.
He introduced me to so many people, but your dad's probably like, no, your dad is my favorite
Aww.
one. Seriously.
But you went to go see that reading.
But
Yeah.
so he sent me to that reading, but Steve set me up. Our relationship was all about sharing experiences, right? And trying to change people's opinion. Like we had dinner with, the founder of PETA, all these different things. And then he would go meet people that I knew, and it was great. It was like a discovery for your two kids goofing off. But that Pablo Hummel thing was so powerful because he set me up to plan it to have 100 veterans come, and I put them by rank, lowest rank up front, all these things. And then I went to go sit in the back with Steve, and Steve goes, "No, you're in the orchestra pit by yourself."
All by yourself?
And I was like, "Oh," and I'm sitting there, and Al Pacino was reading it to me. And if you don't know it, it's really about a loss of innocence through war. And it's this journey that like only a soldier could capture. Like you could never, if you've never been to combat, you wouldn't understand this journey
That's all right.
there's this journey of fearfulness, and then there's like this comfort, and then there's this camaraderie and this brotherhood. And then you get so comfortable with it, you get a little arrogant and caught up with it and passionate about it. And then there's a decline. Like there's this whole cycle to it that captures. And I was so unaware of it because I'm a film dude, not a play guy. That was so impactful. Not gonna lie, I'll admit it right here. I cried for damn near 90 minutes.
Wow.
Like it was great.
Wow.
So if you haven't seen Pablo Hummel, super awesome. Like it's phenomenal.
That's all the time that we have for today. But Mikey, is there any final thought that you'd like to share with the audience?
Stop chewing bubblegum. Find music, film, books that espouse anything other than mainstream. Challenge yourself.
Discover yourself.
Discover yourself and push people to come with you.
Thank you, Mikey, for coming on to the show.
Thank you.
Feel free to check out Smoke Bros on their website, smokedbros.com. Also, they have an app. I just learned that today. I'm Gala Avery, and this has been The Gala Show.